In the darkest corners of the world, there is a kingdom that freezes the human conscience. North Korea. Here, shadows are not cast by the setting sun, but by the veils of tyranny and oppression. Behind the grand parades and the unyielding gaze of the dictators lies a nightmare. A dynasty, born with Kim Il-sung and carried on by his heirs, has wrapped this land in suffocating darkness. To understand the horror, you must look inside the gulags. Places like Camp 22 or the infamous Hwaryong camp, where the flame of humanity is brutally extinguished. Hunger, torture, death. The story of Otto Warmbier, a young American trapped in the regime's punitive machine, remains a haunting reminder, a living proof of the brutality hidden in the shadows of North Korea's system. Gandhi's words echo once more. The real demons of the world run within our own hearts, and it is there that the battle must be fought. After the Second World War, Korea found itself divided in two, North and South. From that moment, the destiny of human rights in the North took shape. In 1948, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was officially born, led by Kim Il-sung, soon to be revered as the eternal president. With him in power, the country built its identity around an ideology called juche, meaning self-reliance. At first sight, it sounded inspiring. Independence, national pride, freedom from external control. But behind the words, juche became a weapon. It strengthened the hand of the state, silenced dissenters, and consolidated a regime that placed power above people. Pyongyang, the beating heart of North Korea, became the symbol of this new national identity. Streets filled with colossal statues of Kim Il-sung. Every building, every wall breathed propaganda. There was no escape from the message. The leader was everywhere. Yet behind the grandeur, there was fear. Dissidents taken away in the silence of night. Families reduced to whispers, careful never to utter the wrong word. But what happened to those who dared to speak? Their fate always led to the same places, camps that still chill the blood, like Yodok, Camp 15. In the early 1950s, the Korean peninsula was in flames. North and South fought not only for borders, but for supremacy. And alongside the battles came stories of horror. From the North, brutal orders, entire villages to be wiped out, simply suspected of helping the enemy. From the South, accounts of captured Northerners stripped of even the most basic rights. These were troubling signs, a dark presage of what, in years to come, would become normality, a nation trapped in the logic of fear and repression. With the rise of Kim Jong-il, son of Kim Il-sung, control over the population became even harsher. A system called songbun was born, a classification that decided the destiny of every North Korean. It wasn't only about who you were, but who your parents, your grandparents, even your ancestors had been. Songbun decided everything: where you could live, what work you could do, how many rations you were given. A system with 51 categories, divided between those considered loyal, the core class, and those branded as hostile. It wasn't just a label. It was a sentence that could haunt entire families for generations. Imagine being born already guilty. In North Korea, your life could be condemned not by your own actions, but by the deeds of your grandparents. As the world embraced globalization at the end of the 20th century, North Korea chose isolation. Defector Kang Chol-hwan, who spent a decade inside Yodok, wrote of the terrible conditions and human rights abuses he witnessed.
어처구니가 없으니까 그냥 가져가라. 이렇게 해가지고 이제 저 어항에 아마 그 사건 때문에 제 책 이름이 아쿠아리움 속의 평양이라는 이제 그런.
With the rise of Kim Jong-un, many hoped for change, a breath of openness, a sign of thaw. But that optimism quickly faded. Nuclear ambitions grew, fueling fear and deepening isolation, and satellite images told a different truth. Vast prison camps hidden behind unbreakable walls. The testimonies of defectors added even darker details: public executions, collective punishment, lives crushed by repression. Yet, even among the shadows, a fragile spark of hope remained. Smuggled radios carried news from the outside world. Underground markets, the Jangmadang, became beating hearts of exchange and information. A delicate window of freedom, sometimes quietly tolerated by local authorities. But what secrets were truly hidden inside these camps? The voices of survivors open a window into an inferno few have seen, and fewer have escaped. Among mountains and forests, far from the eyes of the world, rose the Kwanliso, political camps, secret prisons. Their origin dates back to the 1950s under Kim Il-sung. They were built to consolidate power, to extinguish opposition. Over time, they multiplied. At their peak, more than 200,000 prisoners were confined in these places. The most infamous, Camp 22 at Hworyong, near the border with China, an immense expanse, a world of its own. Here, a single careless gesture could doom you. Listening to a foreign radio or uttering the wrong word, the outcome was always the same: forced labor, torture, inhuman conditions. Shin Dong-hyuk, born inside Camp 14 at Kachon, described this nightmare in his book, Escape from Camp 14. As a child, he witnessed public executions. He endured tortures that surpass imagination. And he left behind words that still freeze the blood. In the camp, there is no love. We are machines barely alive. And yet, even in that hell, life refused to vanish. Secret romances, dreams of escape, rebellions drowned in blood. Humanity resisted, even where it should not have existed. But control did not end at the gates of the camps. It stretched into squares, villages, open fields. Public executions became instruments of fear. In the 1960s and 70s, during political purges, the message was clear: dissent would never be tolerated. Ordinary citizens faced firing squads even for minor crimes, like selling videos smuggled from the South. The population was forced to watch, children included. The goal? To instill terror, to show that no one was safe. And alongside these scenes were the sessions of self-criticism in workplaces, moments when each person had to confess errors and shortcomings, a theater of fear that reinforced obedience. It wasn't only about physical violence, it was about control over the mind. In North Korea, you could never feel safe, not even in your own home. Beneath the bronze statues and military parades, another reality unfolded. The newspaper, Rodong Sinmun, became the regime's megaphone. Television, radio, songs, everything served the state's narrative. Writers and artists who dared step out of line were punished. In the 1980s, North Korea even developed an industry of propaganda cinema. The most striking case, the abduction of South Korean director Shin Sang-ok and actress Choi Yoon-hee, forced to revitalize North Korea's film industry. With the arrival of the internet age, the country sealed itself behind a digital wall, the Kwangyong Internet, a closed garden without access to the outside world. But USB drives, smuggled radios, and Chinese cell phones began to crack open small windows of truth, especially along the borders. And while the regime built higher walls, truth slipped through the tiniest cracks: a hidden radio, a smuggled memory stick, a whispered story. Beyond the DMZ, created in 1953, the regime introduced internal passports to restrict movement. Pyongyang became a fortress reserved for the elite. Travel abroad, a privilege granted only to a few, often while holding their families hostage. The Tumen and Yalu rivers turned into theaters of desperate escapes, especially in the 1990s. Those captured faced internment or execution. Defectors like Hyunseo Lee described exhausting journeys full of fear and emotional scars. Today, with electrified fences and tighter surveillance, escape is even more difficult, yet the will to flee has never died. What would you risk for freedom? Thousands have tried to cross those rivers. Some found liberty, others only death. In the 1990s, North Korea faced a devastating famine. The arduous march, bad weather, outdated farming methods, and the collapse of foreign partners drove millions into hunger. Families searched for herbs and bark just to survive. International aid from the WFP and NGOs arrived, but distribution remained firmly in the regime's hands. Underground markets, the Jangmadang, became a fragile valve of survival. Balconies turned into gardens. Farmers rediscovered basic techniques. Everyone fought simply to stay alive. North Korea showed the world images of modern, free hospitals. But inside their walls, the truth was different. Constant blackouts, shortages of medicine, lack of equipment. Doctors forced to improvise with what little they had. Informal markets for medicine replaced pharmacies. Neighborhood clinics and traditional practices filled the gaps. The World Health Organization intervened against malaria and tuberculosis, but conditions remained extreme. And when the state failed to feed or heal, survival became an act of rebellion. Every herb collected, every hidden market stall was a quiet protest against the regime. Once, Pyongyang was called the Jerusalem of the East. But with the rise of the Kim dynasty, religion was extinguished. Temples and churches destroyed or converted. Praying outside state control meant risking your life. And yet, secret congregations, night masses in basements, hidden Buddhist rituals continued to exist. Faith itself became an act of resistance. Radio receivers tuned only to state channels. No real internet. Kwangmyong, the intranet, the only window allowed. And yet, people found ways to resist. USB drives filled with South Korean dramas, secret parties to listen to foreign broadcasts, news leaking across borders. A black market of information pierced the digital Iron Curtain. Even in silence, people found ways to hear forbidden voices. Stories, songs, and prayers traveled across borders like sparks in the dark. From the 1980s onward, the memoirs of defectors began telling the world the truth. Books by Kang Chol-hwan, Park Yeon-mi, and Jang Jin-sung revealed the camps, the hunger, the propaganda, but also the struggles of starting new lives in foreign lands. Not every escape ended in freedom. Many fell into traps, were forcibly repatriated, or compelled to make staged confessions for the regime. By the 1990s, the international community was torn between humanitarian aid and diplomatic pressure. The UN Commission of Inquiry in 2014 compared the scale of abuses to the worst atrocities of the 20th century. The EU, Japan, the US, and NGOs pushed for resolutions and programs, a global chorus that too often clashed with the regime's wall of silence. The world spoke. Reports were written. Resolutions passed. But inside North Korea, the silence of fear still reigned. From Siberia to the Middle East, tens of thousands of North Koreans were sent abroad to work. Closely watched by guardians of the regime, their wages funneled back to the state. Construction sites, mines, restaurants, open-air prisons under another name. And yet, even in these distant places, moments of humanity were born through contact with ordinary people. In the 1990s, famine marked every home. Families dug for roots, boiled tree bark, hunted insects. Survival blurred the line between life and death. Yet the Jangmadang markets grew into a pulse of resilience, where whispers, goods, and hope were exchanged beneath the eyes of the state. What happens when survival itself becomes defiance? In North Korea, every secret trade, every hidden meal was an act of courage. North Korea displayed its hospitals to the world as symbols of free healthcare, but inside, patients faced darkness. No electricity, no medicine, doctors improvising with herbal remedies, broken equipment, bare hands. The system was crumbling, but the illusion of strength was carefully preserved for outsiders. Religion, once a lifeline, was crushed under the weight of ideology. Churches dismantled, temples erased, faith replaced by portraits of the leader. Still, underground, believers gathered, whispering prayers, sharing hope in secret cellars. Faith became rebellion, and belief itself a crime. Even when belief was outlawed, the human spirit refused to surrender, because some things cannot be erased by fear. By the late 20th century, defectors' voices carried further. Their memoirs painted pictures of hunger, despair, cruelty, but also of resilience. Park Yeon-mi spoke of fear and escape. Shin Dong-hyuk revealed life and survival inside the camps. Their stories cracked the facade that the regime tried so hard to maintain. International organizations responded with aid, resolutions, sanctions, but change inside remained slow, almost invisible. For every defector's story, thousands remained silent behind the barbed wire. Reports can condemn. Sanctions can punish. But what happens when a nation itself becomes a prison? As the sun sets over the Korean peninsula, the words of Elie Wiesel still echo. There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. And perhaps this is our responsibility, to remember, to speak, to resist silence. Because silence is the sharpest weapon of every dictatorship.